You know, when I first heard that Charles Manson had connections with the Beach Boys, I couldn't believe it. I mean, the Beach Boys? The band that brought us good vibrations and endless summer vibes? It's the last thing you'd expect, right? But the story of how these two worlds collided is one of the most bizarre, twisted, and honestly chilling intersections of crime and music history. And what's more, it's a story that's been almost entirely buried. By the end of this video, you're going to understand how a dangerous cult leader, a man whose name became synonymous with evil, not only crossed paths with one of America's most beloved bands, but almost changed the course of rock music forever. But more importantly, you'll see the disturbing reality of what happens when fame, power, and manipulation blend together in the hands of a madman. And trust me, you won't want to miss a second of this story. So, let me take you back to the late 1960s. The summer of love was winding down, but the Beach Boys were still riding high. They were a symbol of carefree American youth, their music flooding radios with sun-drenched harmonies. But behind the scenes, things weren't as picture-perfect as their songs made them seem. The band, especially drummer Dennis Wilson, was going through some serious changes. The music industry was shifting, and they were feeling the pressure. But for Dennis, something much darker was brewing. And it all started the day he picked up two hitchhikers on Sunset Boulevard. Now, picture this. Dennis, a rock star living the high life, drives his sleek, fast car down the iconic Los Angeles Strip. He sees two women thumbing for a ride, and, well, being Dennis Wilson, he doesn't think twice. He picks them up, offers them a place to stay, and eventually, these women introduce him to their leader. That leader? Charles Manson. Yes, the same Manson who would later go on to orchestrate one of the most infamous killing sprees in American history. At first, it seemed like an innocent, almost fateful encounter. Dennis, always open to new experiences and people, was intrigued by Manson's charisma. Manson presented himself as a musician, a spiritual guide, someone who could see through the superficiality of the Hollywood scene. And Dennis? He was hooked. He invited Manson and his so-called family into his home, not realizing that he was letting in far more than just some eccentric drifters. Here's where it gets weird. Manson, a failed musician with dreams of stardom, saw Dennis as his golden ticket into the music industry. He believed he was destined for greatness, and that the Beach Boys, yes, the Beach Boys, would help him achieve it. And here's the thing. For a brief moment, it looked like that might actually happen. Dennis introduced Manson to some big names in the industry, including his producer, Terry Melcher, who at the time was one of the most influential figures in rock music. Can you imagine? Charles Manson, sitting in front of one of the top producers in LA, playing his strange, folksy songs, believing he was on the cusp of rock stardom. But here's the catch. Melcher wasn't interested. He saw right through Manson's facade. The dream was over before it even began. But for Manson, this rejection was just the beginning of a much darker path. You see, Manson's ego couldn't handle being turned down. He'd built up this entire narrative in his head, that he was a prophet, a leader destined to change the world through his music. And when that world rejected him, he snapped. He blamed Melcher. He blamed the music industry. And in a twisted turn of fate, he blamed society at large. And this is where things take a truly horrifying turn. Rejected by the mainstream, Manson turned inward, deepening his grip on his followers, twisting his delusions into something far more dangerous. He began preaching about an upcoming race war, something he called helter-skelter, a term he borrowed from a Beatles song, twisting its meaning to fit his apocalyptic vision. And the Beach Boys? They were no longer just rock stars to Manson. They became symbols of the very system he despised, the system he felt had denied him his rightful place. But before we get to the tragedy that would follow, let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered how close we've come to letting the wrong people influence our culture, our music, our very way of life? The Manson Beach Boys connection is a terrifying example of how easily the lines between fame and manipulation can blur. And if Dennis Wilson, a man at the height of his success, could be fooled by someone like Manson, what does that say about the rest of us? Now here's where the story hits its darkest note. Manson, feeling betrayed by the music industry, by the world, began orchestrating acts of violence to bring about the chaos he had been predicting. And while the Beach Boys managed to distance themselves from him before things reached their horrific climax, the damage was already done. Dennis Wilson was left haunted by his involvement with Manson. He never fully recovered from the psychological toll of letting this man into his life. And for the Beach Boys, the association with Manson, even after all these years, is a dark shadow that follows them to this day. What's even more chilling is that Manson wasn't just some lunatic rambling in the background. He was actively involved in the Beach Boys world, to the point where one of his songs, Cease to Exist, was even recorded by the band, though they changed the lyrics and the title to Never Learn Not to Love. Imagine that. A song written by Charles Manson, recorded by the Beach Boys, released to the world without most people ever knowing the true origins. So, what can we take away from all this? The story of Charles Manson and the Beach Boys is more than just a bizarre footnote in music history. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked influence, about how easily someone with sinister motives can worm their way into the fabric of popular culture. It's a reminder that sometimes the most seemingly innocent connections can have the most devastating consequences. But there's more to this story. Manson's connection to the Beach Boys is just one piece of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that continues to intrigue and terrify people to this day. And if you want to uncover even more shocking details about how Manson manipulated those around him, about how he used music and charm as weapons in his twisted game, I have something special for you. At the end of this video, I'll show you how you can dive deeper into the psychology of cult leaders like Manson, and how to protect yourself from falling under the influence of dangerous individuals like him. So, what do you think? Could you have seen it coming? Or would you have been fooled like Dennis Wilson was? If you found this story as mind-blowing as I did, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you want more untold stories from the dark side of music history. Trust me, there are plenty more where this came from. And if you're ready to dive even deeper into the dark psychology that drives people like Charles Manson, check out the link in the description, because the rabbit hole goes even deeper than you think.